You may well have heard of the alt-right in the American context, but it's not just a phenomenon south of the border. Munk School of Global Affairs journalism fellow Ghada Alsharif has been making a study of Canada's so-called alt-right and its alt-facts, and she joins us now to tell us about what she's learned. Welcome, Ghada.
Thank you for having me.
What made you interested in reporting on and seeking out members of the alt-right in Canada?
So I kind of accidentally stumbled into it, and I'm in a fellowship program at the Munk School of Global Affairs, and initially I was researching something completely different. And when Trump won the elections, I don't know. I felt angry. I felt confused. I felt, how did this happen? How did we get it so wrong? And I remember in that moment, I was like, well, I want to do what the American media did not do, which was, I guess in some ways take these people seriously.
You're from Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
You're a woman. Essentially, you're the enemy of the alt-right. Meeting them for coffee,
yeah,
calling them up. What was that experience like?
Surprisingly, not as bad as I thought it was going to be.
What do you mean? Like, were they happy to see you, or were they cordial?
Yeah. So they were charming. They were polite. They were everything that, before I met with them, I didn't think they were going to be. One in specific, his name is Stewart. He calls himself the creator of the group Alternative for Canada. Mm-hmm. It's predominantly a Facebook group, but I was really, really nervous at first, but I went in I wiped my brain clean mm-hmm. of any kind of biases that I had towards these people, and we just ended up having this really free-flowing conversation. It was over coffee, and yeah, nervous at first, but definitely just really, really cordial, really polite, really charming. I was really surprised at how intelligent he was, and some of the people that other people I'd spoken to were as well. It was off-putting for sure. Understanding them was really scary because a lot of the times when he was talking or when others were talking, I'm talking about Stewart. Mm-hmm. I understood where his grievances were coming from. I understood, even if they were incorrect or even if I didn't agree with them, I got it.
What do they want?
Predominantly, I guess, so one of their main things was anti-immigration, which is, you see that in the States as well. So one of the things that I found really, really interesting was the use of language is not overtly racist, which caught me off guard initially when I was speaking to some of them. I had to go back to some of my interviews and really, really listen mm-hmm. to some of the things that they were saying to catch on to, I guess, the racist undertones. And, that had to do with a lot of rebranding of the white supremacist neo-Nazi movement into mm-hmm. what we know now as the so-called alt-right.
What did you learn from them? What did they
learn?
Learn?
So anti-immigration, mm-hmm. so things like, going back to my conversation with Stewart, when I was talking to him, he said, I don't think it's as much of an issue in Canada because we don't share a border with Mexico. And I mm-hmm. said, what do you mean? And he said, well, we don't have a people coming into Canada changing the makeup of our culture. So right off the bat, again, I didn't really catch on to it until I went back and listened to it, and I was like, oh my God, what are you saying? Mm-hmm. But then, he says that the Syrian refugee situation is an issue. And, so it's very subtle.
Something we heard a lot in the mm-hmm. States is this nostalgia about the past.
Yeah.
Do you think that that's another element to how they're feeling, the way they're feeling? Or one of their...
Yeah, so there was definitely, when I was interviewing a couple of them, there was definitely this feeling of, in the past we had this sense of community, right? And that was another really, really big point that a lot of these people want to make is they're anti-neoliberalism, they're anti-globalization. They believe that globalization and neoliberalism has taken away their identity and their community as a people. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of anger towards that, where in the past, they believe that, for example, in smaller communities and smaller cities, families were able to have, 6 kids, and now their kids are having 3, and then their kids are having 2, and there's a lot of anger towards that because, and I remember Mark saying specifically that globalization and neoliberalism assumes that you don't want to be in a community, that you want to be like everybody else in the world and the same. And he said, I'm not interested in getting a $10 pair of pants from Walmart. I'm interested in a job. And
isn't that something that everybody feels?
Yeah, 100%. And
so why the division? I guess that's my
So the division is because of anger. It's, I think, and I'm not saying it's justified by any means, but I think that in a time when there's such economic inequality and economic polarization, people try to look for an answer. People, we've seen it, we saw it in the 80s, we see it now. When people are desperate or, they feel like their jobs are being taken away. So, for example, the GM plant in Oshawa that shut down, Mark Stewart told me about that, where he said that it left a lot of his friends' families unemployed or underemployed. So what ends up happening when people are so upset is they turn to the other, right? So they turn to, what can I get angry at and what is the easiest? And they hear this stuff that's like the immigrants are coming to take your job, they're coming to take your job, and they can't explain it in any other way. So they end up doing that. So that's where the racism comes out, and that's where the anger comes from. Even rather than looking to corporations and the government to sort of lay blame, they
look at their neighbor.
They look at their neighbor. Yeah.
Do they identify with the term alt-right? Because this is a fairly new term.
Oh,
right?
yeah. So this is a really interesting one. So I remember I went back to Mark Stewart and I said, can I say that you are alt-right? And he said, yeah, I don't have a problem with that if, you want a way to guide your audience. My friends call us European nationalists. Again, the whole manipulation of the language, it's like they've been trained in PR, which makes it really, really dangerous. But in terms of identifying with alt-right, it just depends on who you talk to. I think it was David Duke who initially said, we need to rebrand. So take off the white hoods, put on the business suits, become more appealing to the people.
Become more mainstream.
100%, exactly. And then obviously social media has helped with that a lot. But yeah, this whole rebranding into what is called the alt-right, like you said, it's a new term, makes it more palatable, for sure. Yeah.
And do they identify as being racist?
No.
Or do they see, okay, so
Yeah.
what do they,
So
how do they explain that?
if you go up to a racist person or somebody you perceive as racist and you say, are you racist? They're never going to say, yes, I'm racist. They're going to say, I'm, defending the way that what I believe and what I think. So it's always on a spectrum, right? It's always so difficult. Racism, white supremacy, alt-right, neo-Nazism, it's all on this very murky gray area spectrum. And, when I asked Mark Stewart this question, I said, people think you're racist. Are you racist? And he said, no, that's not, it's not my problem that they think I'm racist. I'm not. I'm just trying to defend and protect the rights of the Canadian people.
You have talked to many former members of neo-Nazi groups in Canada. What do they have to say about what's happening today?
So Tony McAleer and this lady, Elizabeth Moore, both of whom were very intertwined and, in the Heritage Front and neo-Nazi movement in the 90s. And sorry, the Heritage Front, to clarify, was one of the most prominent white supremacist groups in the 90s in Canada. And what they have to say about it now is that it is definitely more dangerous. It is more, and it's more dangerous because, in their time, it was, they'd have flyers, right? So they'd drop the flyers in phone booths or in public places where, you could just pick it up and read it, but it didn't spread as fast as the internet and social media. Yeah. And they were a lot more aggressive about it too. There wasn't a lot of,
aggressive
shame.
how, like in?
So aggressive in the sense that, like a lot more ready to stand up for what they believe in and vocalize it publicly. And, with the racism wasn't very hidden, right? It was, was very overtly anti-Semitic. It was very, and at the time it was anti-Semitism versus now you're seeing more targeting towards Islam but also anti-Semitism and other racial groups. But at the time, there was really, the people who were involved, there was no fear. It was very much, like I said, boots on the ground, group gatherings. They really rallied around rock concerts and really.
So what's changed then?
So when I was talking to Grant Bristow, who is a CSIS spy who infiltrated or was investigating the Heritage Front for 6 years.
And he was undercover?
He was undercover, and he said that, it's very rare for people to radicalize on their own, so self-radicalize. You always have, to some degree, somebody bringing you in, somebody pulling you in somehow. So now what's changed and what makes it so much more dangerous is that you have 50 to 100 to however many sites online that one could be really, really extreme. So if somebody is sort of, going through and clicking and they're like, oh, this is really racist, not for me, they might find another one that isn't so racist, but does appeal to them in some kind of way. And so then they end up reading that site, right? So you have all these different avenues and all these different ways that you can radicalize, which is what makes it dangerous.
And final question, what advice do you have about dealing with the alt-right in Canada?
What advice? I think it's very tricky. So it's definitely, and especially with the media, it's tough because you don't want to give them a platform to speak, right? But it's balancing this whole, dissecting the language, understanding where it's coming from, really understanding what these people are saying and why, and revealing, what it means. And I think also what I'm finding is really interesting is this idea of understanding them. Not agreeing with them, I'm saying understanding. So I think that that's something that's really missing from what we need to be doing, where it's, why do you think the way that you do? What experiences have led you to think this way or believe these things, in order to sort of have that dialogue. And I think dialogue is something that we really, really do need to have, and amongst ourselves, our friends, people who think like us, but also people who don't think like us, right? So we can, so we don't make the same mistakes that the US has made.
Ghada, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it so much.
Thanks.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit TVO.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.